Welcome to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. Thank you for joining me today. I know this is going to be a great conversation. And why do I know that? It has a lot to do with my guest, Jon Hand. So when Laurel and I decided that this season, our fourth season, we were going to be introducing our listeners to people who have transformed their lives by doing their own inner work. My guest today, Jon Hand, immediately came to mind. Jon and I met earlier this year, just a few months ago, through Coaches Rising in the Neuroscience of Change course. Jon is a coach as well. Over the past 25 years, he has been a pastor, a leadership development consultant, a business entrepreneur, an educator, a denominational leader, and a movement leader. And just this morning, before we started recording, I found out that Jon is also a former podcaster. So he lives in Welland, Ontario in Canada. So Jon, welcome. I'm going to tell our listeners that we'll put in the show notes, we'll put your website, your LinkedIn profile, so that if our listeners want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing as a coach, they can find you. So Jon, welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to learn more about you, your inner work journey, and the beautiful life that I assume you have not knowing you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Laurel. This is great. I just love I love the title of this podcast, A Beautiful Life. I think I want that. Clearly you want that. Clearly your listeners want that. I think this is a deep longing aspiration that we have, that we all want a beautiful life. And that's the fun part, is like wanting a beautiful life.
That's right.
And then the work is, it takes work to have a beautiful life and to truly be, to truly work towards being a person of goodness, of truth, of beauty, on the inside.
Yeah.
Like our whole world is conspiring to keep it on the outside. And we're trying to do a beautiful life from the inside out.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because often I think about beautiful work, beautiful life. It is beautiful work, and it's not easy, and it's not hard. And we're going to talk about, or it's not always easy, and it can be hard, yeah. Right? But it's not hard. Maybe it's not hard, but it is beautiful work because it is the work that creates a beautiful life. So as we begin, I want our listeners to know that you and I don't know each other well. As I mentioned, we just met a few months ago, and I don't know what your home is like. I don't know what kind of car you drive. I don't know where you go on vacation, how much money you make, or how long you've been married. And when I was thinking about that, inviting you as a guest, there's a lot I don't know about. And that list of things are things that most people assume are the ingredients, if you will, of a beautiful life, right?
Right.
So, but I have a sense that you are living a beautiful life and you have created a beautiful life. So I want you to tell us a little bit about what is it about your life, or what is it about a beautiful life that you consider beautiful?
Well, that's a fun question. What makes a beautiful life beautiful? I think the heart of that question assumes that there is such thing as beauty, that there is a life that is beautiful. And that part, I can only answer from the perspective of how I understand what is beautiful, that then I want to pattern my life after in that way. And I think that we all have an archetype of what beauty looks like when we think about this idea of a beautiful life, of a beautiful anything. So as a starting point, I would say I need an archetype of what a beautiful life looks like. I need a pattern and a model to pattern myself after, because if I just make up what beautiful is, it's just going to look a lot more like Jon Hand in the world, which has some good qualities there. but too much of me maybe isn't even for myself isn't necessarily what is the beauty that the world needs from me. They need part of that, but do they need all of that? So that's the question. So I think I'd put the question back. What is a beautiful life? And for me, the pattern of that archetypally would be the words, ways, works, and wisdom of like the historical Jesus Christ. I think that is a human, kind of ensconced in pages of scripture and of tradition, and archetypally now in the maybe even in the back of the mind for most Western culture, for most of us in Western culture. And I think that pattern, whatever your pattern is, whoever your pattern is, you have one. If it's you or if it's something outside of you, um, I want my life to look like the beauty that his life represented. So, what does that mean? Does that mean it means a selflessness that I'm not claiming, but I'm claiming the journey to pursue it. So there's a selflessness, a generosity of spirit, a deep interest in the other, even if the other is my ideological enemy. I think a forgiveness that I want my life to be characterized as one who knows how to forgive and let go. There's a sense of control, releasing control, which is very hard for me. Like my hands up, I'm a self-avowed control freak. I'm an Enneagram 2 for Enneagram people out there. And I'm a 2-3. I want to succeed. I want you to love me. I want to be relevant. I want to be needed. And and so that predisposes me to manipulate relationships to get my needs met. And I want to let go of that. And I want to trust. I want to be a person of radical trust that I'm not going to use you to get my needs met. I'm going to be generous to you. I'm going to be kind and courageous. And then I'm going to trust that my needs will get met. I have to trust, the divine, trust the universe. I have to trust that I'll be taken care of if I live generously. And I think that's hard. That's hard for me at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because when I think about that question of what is it that makes life beautiful, many of the
Mm-hmm.
things that you said really resonate with me, right? Um, I often boil it all down into curiosity. I
Mm-hmm.
want to live a life that allows me to be a curious individual. And when I'm curious, I am open to others, right? I'm forgiving, I'm generous, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really interesting that you bring up, the fact that we do look for we look for a model to follow, right? And often when we're growing up, we're, the question of who are your heroes, right? Who do
Yeah.
you want to be like when you grow up?
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to say I went to Catholic school for 16 years. Those of our listeners who have been with me for a while know 16 years of Catholic school, and never once in third grade did anyone dress up like Jesus when we had to come in for career day and be, dress up like who we wanted to be, right? Um, but but the archetype, it's so important, I think, to have that model of
Yeah.
who do you want to be like, right?
Yeah.
And it could be a grandparent, it could be Mother Teresa, but knowing the characteristics of who we want to be really does allow us to start creating our beautiful life. Um, and it has nothing to do, and I love this because none of it has to do, at least in your words, with your possessions, right?
No, no,
Right?
none of it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's when you look at like what's, as humans, we want to live for what is the most substantive in a world that is like bombarding us to live for what is ephemeral and temporary and, quick and short term. And so maybe a beautiful life would be the commitment to invest one's life in the things that are going to endure the longest and hopefully endure after us, right? And
Yes.
all of our possessions, like we will die, they our families will, keep a few treasures, and then they're going to pack up our shit and they're going to put it in boxes, and it's going to Goodwill or it's going somewhere, like, and we will be forgotten if we were being measured by our possessions within 5 years of our
Yes.
death, except for a few things. We will be forgotten. Our grandkids won't know those parts of us, and our great grandkids and their kids won't even know our names. So
Yes.
there you go.
Yes. Well, we're going to move on from that, Jon. Thank you for that.
Just bringing cheer and hope wherever I go. Yes.
Okay. So, Laurel and I talk a lot about the inner work, right? The beautiful work, inner work that we believe creates a beautiful life. And we both have experienced it. I've experienced it in my life. Some of my, darkest moments were those clues that I needed to really look inside and start figuring out my
Yeah.
internal shit, right? Um,
Yeah.
to work through that. So what does inner work mean to you, or how would you describe the inner work?
Yeah. I describe the inner work of um let's say mending what's been broken or twisted. So we're born into this world and we have um we're not blank slates, I don't believe, but we're born with a disposition towards the world that leans in the direction of what is good, true, and beautiful. And those are the classic like transcendentals. Those are the highest goods that philosophers in all the world religions, and then pre-world religions in the Western world, like the Greek philosophers, like those who are like have always been curious about like the moral universe. They're all pointing to what is good, true, and beautiful. And the highest aims for us as people, and where we find the greatest joy, meaning, say, purpose, satisfaction in the pursuit of, though it might be hard. So we're born into the world like with a disposition towards the pursuit of those things, and then we live in the real world, and where we experience disappointments, we experience abuse and hurts. These things accumulate in the substrate, of our psyche, and so we're developing a sense of self, and we're developing a sense of self in reaction to the good, the true, and the beautiful that we've experienced that's been given to us, and in reaction to the hurts, the disappointments, the ways we've been shamed, the ways we've been abandoned, rejected. And so we're making little contracts with ourselves internally and unconsciously that are kind of these handshakes with parts of us that say, I'm never going to experience rejection again. I'm never going to experience being shamed that way, or I'm going to make sure what happened to them doesn't happen to me. And so we develop these strategies then to mitigate for that nightmare scenario, for that thing that we don't want to happen, because we don't want to hurt, which is like, yeah, we don't want to hurt. So these are whatever survival strategies, but then we end up bonding with those survival strategies, and we think they're us. They become a part of us. So, I'm defending against rejection, which might come out through my personality as I'm just direct, and I'm kind of, clear spoken, and I demand what I want, right? Or I do the opposite, which is I absorb uh, what you want so that you'll accept me. And so either one is defensive, as in I'm going to reject you before you reject me, and I'm abrasive, or I'm absorbing like all of what you want. I'm trying to please you so that you won't reject me. Both are strategies. and then both we bond with at the personality level, and then we think it's us, and it's not us. It's actually a strategy to keep us from feeling hurt. And these strategies then over time, they end up like having the opposite effect of what we set out and what our subconscious set out to protect us from. And they often end up ensuring that the thing that we want to happen to us the least happens to us the most. And that's when we have this invitation to intersect with ourselves and to start the work, which is I've been I've been bent, twisted, or broken in a place. There's a rupture, and I now need to do the work of like resetting that part of my sense of self and resetting that psyche, so to speak, and or inviting healing. But to face that, I have to face myself, and that part's humbling. And this is what's hard about the work is like we have to face ourselves. We have to face these parts of us that we don't like. Others see it in us, but we don't want to see it in ourselves. And that's like step one. Can you face yourself? And for those who do, the rest of it, it's not cake, but it's way easier once you're on the other side of that. So
Yeah,
what
but
are you hearing? What are you hearing in that?
it's really interesting because when you were saying, the strategies that we develop, right, as strategies to protect us from the hurt or that emotion that we don't want to feel, the
Yeah.
experience we
Yeah.
don't want to experience. You know, you were talking about it in an, either abrasive or the I heard people pleaser, right, where we're taking on
Right.
to be accepted and loved. Um, and I just want to say, we can be both in the single day, right? We
Oh,
can
for
have
sure.
we have so many strategies, and often we use everything we have depending on the situation we're in, the people we're with, what has worked in the past, right? And I love that you are kind of um, bringing up that it's not us, it's a strategy. Because how often do I often introduce myself as a former people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser, right? Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
Former is a little bit bold of me to claim that.
In process, recovering,
That's right.
recovering.
That's right.
Yeah.
I am in process. Um, and so, but we create these labels as if they are us. And we do create this personality and we own our personality. And it's really a messy mix of stories we've told ourselves and stories other people have told us about who we are.
About us. Yeah, that's right.
Um,
That's right.
and the looking at yourself, I love that's the starting point, and it's a great starting point, and that might be, I think, where the resistance comes in when starting that inner work journey, right? That at least in my experience, it takes a big thing for me to start looking at myself rather than looking for external causations for my experience, right? Um, yeah, there was a day, and I know I've told this story on this podcast before, but I'm gonna say it was probably 7 years ago now. In a conversation with my husband, he, I was going to an energy practitioner, and he thought that was just completely woo, and and was surprised at my belief of and the energy around me and within me, and being able to shift energy. And he I said to him, one day you're going to read my obituary and you're going to be surprised. And he said, why, what else are you hiding from me? And I said, without a thought, it just came out of my mouth, nothing. I'm not hiding from myself. And that was the moment I knew, oh, I've got some work to do, right? I need to start really looking at myself because I am hiding much of myself, not just from him or others, but from me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's the so I like to think kind of archetypally because we are story creatures who make sense of life through stories and through metaphors. And I think about like that picture in the Christian Bible in Genesis of Adam and Eve in the garden. So they're tending this plot of land, and they've been put there to exist in harmony with each other and in harmony with a sense of the divine. And then they break trust with each other. They start blaming each other. And then they are hiding from each other, and they're hiding from themselves. They're hiding from the truth of themselves. And then they're hiding from each other. And that's the metaphor of like the fig leaf that's covering them. And
Yes.
then they're hiding from, the ultimate, uh, which is to look in the mirror and truly see what is there for the dynamic textures that it is. We're not any of one thing. Like Alexander Solzhenitsyn said beautifully, the line of good and evil it just runs down the middle of every human. And so we're looking at incredible like projection of goodness, truth, and beauty, and we're looking at brokenness and selfishness and parts of us that we're trying to hide. And I think that's it, right? Like to do the work is the commitment to ourself to come out of hiding. And that's a
Mm.
terrifying thing.
Can I have
Because,
you say that
yeah,
one more time? The commitment to yourself to come out of hiding.
yeah. Like doing the work
Yes.
and this kind of awareness thing
Yes.
is like making the commitment to yourself to, like what you just said, nothing that you're not hiding from yourself. It's like making the commitment to yourself that you're going to be a person who comes into the light and comes into truth and comes in and like is somebody who is not going to hide from yourself first
Mm.
and then from others. And that's terrifying. If we've been hurt and rejected for showing up authentically, then we make a contract with ourselves, which is castle goes around our hearts, right? And we protect ourselves from being known. The problem with that is if we are hiding from ourselves within ourselves and we're hiding from others, we can never know we're loved because people can only love what we show them. If we're showing them a projection that we think will get us accepted, then we're more likely to be accepted, or a projection that rejects them before they can reject us, then we are isolating ourselves from love because we don't give ourselves and others the chance to know us as we are and to see if they will not run away but stay,
Yes.
and then know that we are truly loved, which is like the greatest hope that we all have. It's like our greatest fear is rejection and abandonment, and our greatest longing and hope is that we would truly be loved as we are, for who we are, and nothing more, nothing less. That's enough. And I would say all of the contracts that we make within ourselves, the survival strategies, they're all trying to protect us from either the fear of not being loved or lovable, or protect us from the sense of um, fear within ourselves that we can't answer that for ourselves, that we are lovable. Because that's terrifying for many of us, is that we would actually believe that we are that lovable and acceptable. Like that's the work.
That is the work. And it's so funny. I one of my favorite movie scenes of all time is the final scene in, I think it's the final scene in Bridget Jones' Diary,
Mm.
where she's standing in the street in the snow with a jacket in her underwear. And I don't even know the actor's name. I'm so bad about this, but he wraps his arms around her and says, "I love you just the way you are."
Yeah.
And it's exactly that, right? That to me, it's terrifying and it is exhilarating to think there's the possibility to discover that. And that's what this work is all about. So I want to ask, what was, what brought you to that place of knowing you needed to do the inner work, or was there an event or something? What happened? Or who did you meet that introduced you? But was there that point where you had the aha moment like I did of, oh, I need to look at myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's more than one, I can have more than one too. I do.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, certainly there's a precipitating one I'll tell you about. And then, there's echoes of this that continue to give us opportunity and invitation and windows into the need that we have. They're exposure events, you could say, or let's say opportunities for awakening. I think that's a better one. Opportunities for awakening. Um, yeah. So when I was in my mid 30s, I was kind of establishing my career. So I was very much in like just career pursuit mode, and probably had poor boundaries. I was, even when I was not working, I was mentally working, and I found it very hard to turn off the work mentally. So I was not very present to my family, and was kind of always in this other world, trying to press into the present. But my obsession with the future was always calling me out of the present, or my, you know, kind of obsession with the past, right? With what could have been or should have done differently or should have showed up differently to secure a better future was always competing with the present, which is where all the good stuff happens. Everything good in our life happens right in the present, 4.4 seconds, of the present. So that was building in me that the intensity of like the grip that I had on my life, because I had this fear based on, again, like uninspected in the what I call the roots, in the root system. I had beliefs down there that I didn't even know I had, that were driving the intensity, the urgency on the surface level version of me. And and that works really well in your 20s. At least it did for me, because I could just kind of push through, and you kind of put your head down and you just go. And then people are always cheering you on. You can do anything you want. You can be anything you want. We have this kind of cultural mythology about these things, and we tell our youth. And I get what we're trying to do. It's also could be a curse, because it just doesn't always work out that way. It works great until it doesn't. And so in our 30s, so I do a lot of work with millennials who are what I call hitting the mid 30s wall. And I think if you look at a lot of stories of even your listeners, like look at your 30s, this is a primal decade. Like there's so much going on in your 30s. We're taking on more responsibility than we've ever had. We're thick into our careers. We might be thick into relationships, or maybe even thick into family and having kids now in our 30s. And we've never had more pressure, weight of the world on our shoulders, so to speak. And I call it hydraulics. All of this pressure that's on us starts squeezing down on us, and whatever's underneath, uninspected, starts coming up. And that's because we've spent the bulk of our 20s, teens, 20s, and 30s building the external world of career, of relationships, of maybe family, of trying to like manage and meet expectations of ourselves, of others, of our culture, et cetera, and demands of work. So like it's a lot of external work, and we're still like creating our sense of self and what image we're projecting to the world. Like there's so much going on. And then you come into these places of intense responsibility, and depending on how hard in your personality and how hard you're gripping onto your life, because like how control oriented you are, or how, like you could say, how afraid are you? I was very afraid. I just didn't know it. So holding on to my life, all of a sudden, the energy that would normally sustain that level of life, that pace, that pursuit, that energy starts to run out. And you're like, your body's like, what the hell's happening? So I start having panic attacks, and there's triggers for that at certain times in the week based on different pressure points. And that kind of builds, and I had this growing sense of anxiety. I'm starting to experience like bodily fatigue in ways that I've never encountered before, because I've always just kind of been able to push through. And it was January the 11th in 2012, when I woke up one morning and I was supposed to go to work. And I woke up at 3 a.m., which was not atypical, and like a bank of lights coming on. And I start sweating like I'm being, panicking like I'm being chased by a bear. And that bear was, my future vision that I had to have. And I was so afraid it wouldn't happen. And instead of being able to get out of bed, I just sat in bed and something snapped, like a spring that had been winding for about, I don't know, 34 years. And I just started bawling. I couldn't stop crying. I had this, like, it was a major awakening event. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I felt, as a man, I felt so impotent. I felt so powerless. And it was the best thing that could ever happen to me. And I would sign up for that to happen again every day for what that has produced in my life, because of the awakening that created, the spiritual awakening, the emotional awakening. I didn't even know I had feelings to that point.
Mm,
We all have feelings. I didn't even know I had them. I
mm,
didn't even know how to name them. I had to get this wheel out to tell me like
mm,
what I might be feeling, because I had no clue. And that event just broke all of that open, and I couldn't hide from it and I couldn't run from it, and I had to stop. And I was finally at a moment when I was I was living in the reality of what has been true all along, which is I'm not in control.
mm.
And except I was living in the delusion that I could.
Yeah.
And that event rescued me from a delusion. I'm not in
So,
control.
so what was it, so you have this experience where, you know, when I have these experiences, I would claim I've never had a panic attack. What I like to call it is I become unraveled. I unravel, right? I mean, a panic attack or unraveling is probably the same thing, right? It's that pressure building and knowing that you can't continue to the grasp, the grip, the management of the thing
That's
um,
right.
anymore. And so then what really then what did you do at that time? Like what were your first steps as you began to make peace with the fact that you weren't in control?
Yeah. Well, um, one is I had the luxury of having no choice but to accept that I was not in control,
Yeah,
because I ran out of myself.
yeah,
And that my story is a little dramatic. It's not everybody's story,
yeah,
but um, because of how strong that self determination fear. I mean, it's not either, we're not fully good, fully bad here. It's like I was given the gift of self determination.
yeah,
It's like that's a beautiful gift. It's like I'm created to be a racehorse. Run. Okay. But that same thing has a shadow, and the shadow unchecked, which is why we do the work. But the shadow unchecked is that what creates that drive and that intensity that now it's almost like it's like whose life is this? Am I living my life, or is it living me? Well, my life was living me. I wasn't living my life. So the shadow of my gifts and abilities were living me.
yes,
And so I had to come to the end of those capacities, or at least have them diminished enough to get my attention. And that's when I was like, I had to let go. Like I had to, the term I use, it's got baggage, but the term I use in other settings is surrender. I
yes,
had to like surrender and release. And that was humbling. Like that's ego work, because I had built a whole substructure of identity for myself based on this sense that I'm the strong one, and I'm the one who meets people's needs, and I'm the one who is reliable, and I'm the one, like all of this I'm the one stuff. And that event humbled me and showed me that I can't be the one for everybody and for everything. Like I'm limited, and I have needs, and I'm a human, and I'm worthy of compassion just like everybody else. I just couldn't have it for myself. And, it just exposed a whole other side of my like good and beautiful and true humanity. These are actually gifts to us. Those limitations are actually gifts that we need to be fully human. And I was trying to be human, but without all these other parts of what makes us human, living in the delusion.
Yeah.
So it became good and good for me, but easier for me to like get the point just because I was so limited in my capacity. And then I had to get help. And I was the one who was I'm an Enneagram too. I'm a helper. I'm the one used to helping. And now the helper needed help. And it's like, again, really good for me because it trained me that I'm not superhuman. And so I had to let others help me, which, I mean, that's one of the greatest gifts I still enjoy today. Is like the humiliation of letting others help me is one of the best things to help me become a soul that is good, true, and beautiful.
Yeah. And how many, you said it was in your mid 30s. How many years ago was that?
So I'm 47.
Okay.
So, we're looking at like 12, 13 years
Okay. And I
ago of,
really just ask because I think it's a really beautiful reminder to me, to our listeners, that this work is ongoing, evolving, right? It's almost to me like you continue to do it and it gets sweeter and sweeter. And the asking for help, right? The self-compassion. Like these are practices that I often coach my clients are necessary in their lives. And how can we as humans accept that we are deserving of these practices for ourselves, because of ourselves, right? Our needs. Um, I think that is really, really hard for people. And that's why I love that we often have a lifetime to do this work, that it's not, I'm going to give you a year, John, and you pull your shit together. And I'm going to give you a performance review a year from now and see how you're doing on your self-compassion goals, right? That's not what we're
yeah.
talking about here,
That's
right?
so funny. I often, people ask about this work and I do coaching too, and people get really impatient. I've been at this for 6 months. I've been at this for a year. How come I'm not, seeing the changes that I want to see? And I'm like, well, how long does it take to become a beautiful soul? I don't know what, like 78 years, maybe 80, maybe 85. I don't know.
And if you're like
Maybe
me,
a,
if you're like
maybe a
me, you
lifetime.
or five. I mean, I was going to say, if like me, I think this is probably my fifth life because I'm still learning some of the lessons that I should have learned lifetimes ago, right? But
Right.
it's and that's why I do think like knowing that many people on the planet are doing this work. Many people experience the kind of things that you and I have that have brought them to this work, right? Um, but whatever it is, the thought that as much as we normalized, the racehorse, the go-getter, the superhuman, that now you and I both are in a place where we can normalize, the luxury of enjoying humility and vulnerability and asking for help, right? So I really think that that's a wonderful story of kind of what the work entails. And
Yeah.
as we wrap up, because I know I could talk to you all day, um, I'm gonna I want to ask just another maybe one or two questions about um, what is it that changed for you when you as a result of doing the work? Here we are 15 years later, 14, whatever, 12 years, whatever
Hmm.
years later. Like where do those changes? If you if I was your coach and you'd saying to me, I've been working on this for 12 years and I'm seeing these changes. What are those
Yeah.
changes that you've witnessed for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just so happy uh, to report there's a sense of a couple things. So I'm going to go quick hits and then you can pick up on any of these that you want. So
Okay.
quick hits would be one, way more able to turn frustrations, disappointments, and disruptions into opportunities for wisdom formation. The Greeks say we suffer our way to wisdom. So it's like I'm able to see life through the lens of this wasn't just something that went wrong and inconvenienced me. This is an opportunity to deepen. This is an opportunity for wisdom. And if that's our highest, again, if like good, true, and beautiful is the highest ideal, then the momentary disruptions and even the big disruptions, the suffering, the hurts, the disappointments, the annoyances, the pains in the ass, you run the spectrum. Those are all like opportunities for us to move towards like the vision of our life that we want to be. If the vision is to become rather than to achieve or arrive, but if it's
Or
to become
survive.
something, yeah, or survive, yeah, that's right. That's a good nuance. So the second would be I am I'm less I'm in the positive. I am more rooted and less anxious. I am say more how do I say this? I am non-anxious as a I have a greater sense of non-anxiety as a baseline than I did back then. And that means I'm less compulsive. That means I'm less driven and urgent. That means I am more patient. I am more gracious with myself, but with others. The
Mm.
other would be I'm more present because when you slow down life and you slow down the inner drive that fear creates in us, right? And we have fear responses. We know fight, flight, and freeze. It's like my response to fear is to drive harder and faster. Others have a different challenge, which is they just disappear. And like I never had that problem. And so in the good work and what's resulted is I can slow down and not check out and I can be more present to myself and to those around me. And they it's noticeable. Our presence really matters. We see things, we see people, we're able to communicate that with our body language. And I can't do that if I'm like so obsessed with being in the future and usually driven because I'm afraid of something, right, in the past.
Yeah.
So those are three that I think my family would say, wow, you've really, really shifted in, who you are as a person. By my nature, I've always been others oriented. I'm a someone who loves to cheer others on. So becoming less selfish for me doesn't look like caring more about others. It actually means caring less about others in a weird way. Like literally caring less and like trusting the universe that they're going to be okay and I'm going to be okay and just being able to put it down and turn it
Yeah.
off and rest in that.
Well, I think those are such good points when I think about, the overthinking, not being able to shut off the work that you mentioned, the drive, like always being on, always being the quest for the next thing, right? All of that. I mean, it just feels exhausting, probably because I lived that too, right?
Yeah,
And it's interesting to think about, that fear was to try harder, to exceed expectations, to do more, to prove myself more. Um, and then when the exhaustion was so great, it was the avoidance and hiding, right? And so it's interesting how it shows up in what our body can tell us that our mind doesn't really grasp,
that's right.
right? So,
And part of doing the work is that we can hear our body and because our brain doesn't tell us these things often, but our body does. And so we're
yes,
learning to listen to our body and when it tells us things, we pay attention to that.
yeah. That has been one of the best things for me in the last, I'll say 8 years when I was living in that full out, high achieving, do more, prove more, accomplish more, survival,
Mm,
um, I couldn't even feel my heartbeat if I put my hand on my chest,
that's right.
you know, and now I can feel my heartbeat throughout my entire body, right? Like it
Yes.
just as a
Yeah.
whole, it's interesting that when we need the messages from our body because our mind has taken over, that our body doesn't know how to even bring them forward, or our mind is so busy we don't notice them. So we can
Yeah.
talk more about that next time. 'Cause you and I could talk all day about that. Um,
Seriously.
so if there was one thing or that you think leaving our listeners with if they are just beginning their inner work, if they're wherever they are on their inner work journey, right? Um, what what would you like to leave them with? Maybe some last thing that you want them to know about doing this work.
Yeah. I would want them to know first and foremost if um and especially for the maybe the people who are drawn to you and your story, right? Might have similarities there, who are listening. I think it's like I cannot stress the need for patience and like deep compassion for yourself and for the process. And if you're gonna do the work, it is messy and it's beautiful, right? It's not just hard, it's also like life-giving, but it doesn't happen fast enough. There's always distractions and things that are going to get in the way and like clog up your time. And there's always some other need in your world that's screaming at you. And so it's doing this work is not selfish. And so part of you having compassion for yourself is that it's okay to say no to many of the screaming needs around you, because the greatest gift that you can give those that you love and lead, if you're in positions of leadership and influence, the greatest gift you can give is your own transformation, is your
Mm.
transformed self. Like that is the best thing that you could give them. That's better than, dishes you could do for them. It's better than money you can make for them. Like that's one of those things that lasts way longer, right, than any of these other more temporary, less dense, less, I don't know, impactful. Like who you are and the legacy you're leaving with people, the mark you leave because of who you are, not just for what you do for them, but because of who you are to them. That matters. It really matters. And so it's okay. Say no and prioritize with compassion and patience this work so that you can give them the thing that you want to give them, the thing that they need the most from you, which is your transformed self.
Mm. Well, and in storytelling, or there's always that circle back, right? We end bringing a reminder of circling back to the beginning. And at the beginning, when you and I started this conversation, you had talked about the archetypes that we look for an external role model,
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
And here you are leaving the wisdom to our listeners of be the role model for someone else who's looking
Yeah.
for an archetypal role
Yeah,
model,
I love
right?
that. In the work I do, at one point in a talk I give, I ask people if I could, I was like, if I could have you raise your right hand, if I could deputize you, that you would commit yourself to becoming a guide in this work, in this interior work. And because we have so few guides who actually can take people by the hand and not control it, but guide them through the process of getting to know the terrain of their soul, of like going into the root system, of facing the dragon, so to speak, and inviting like a different narrative, and experiencing release from fear and all the things. It's like we need guides. Would you be a guide? Laurel, you're a guide.
Yes,
Thank you.
John, you're a
Thank
guide.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that work. And your listeners, would you become guides? We
Mm.
need you. We really, really need you. The next generation needs you. So, yeah, raise your right hand. Here we go.
I commit to being a guide. And that is so important. So that is a perfect place for us to end our conversation
Mhm.
today. So again, I am so grateful, appreciative, all the words that you are here with me today. And I knew this was going to be a great conversation. And I'm going to say boldly, I was not wrong. This was a great conversation. So
I'm
many
so
good
glad.
parts about it. And I'm really happy that our paths crossed when they
Hmm.
did. And I look forward to more conversations about this inner work and our beautiful lives when our paths cross again. So
All
thank
right.
you, John. And to our listeners, thank you for being with us. We'll be back for more wonderful conversations in the future. Bye for now.